The top books of the Strugatsky brothers about our reality are Wikipedia, neural networks, self-driving cars. All this was in the novels of the Strugatsky brothers, even before it became mainstream. But science fiction books are significant not only for this and even not at all for this, but what are the top books? And about their meanings that have shaped more than one generation, science fiction writer Vitaly Kaplan. In the new video essay of the Academy of the magazine Thomas No. 1, It's Hard to Be God, this novel of 1963 became the business card of the Strugatsky brothers. A huge number of reprints, translations into foreign languages, to film adaptations of what this book is about. The Earthlings of the 22nd century successfully mastered deep space and discovered an Earth-type planet where there is a reasonable civilization that is at the medieval level. It is being studied with great interest, and then they are going to accelerate development, so that the Aborigines quickly overcome their dark present and achieve a bright future. To do this, there are Earth agents on the planet who are disguised as local residents. The main character is the historian Anton, who works undercover, portrays himself as a noble Don Rumatostorsky. But the further he goes, the more clearly he realizes that something has gone wrong. Reality does not fit into the wonderful ideas of Earthlings. In a nutshell, the book is about the fact that you cannot interfere in someone else's life, in someone else's story, especially from above, considering yourself better, more correct than those whom you are going to benefit. The fantastic situation drawn by the Strugatskys is easy to project onto ordinary life. For example, does someone want to plant the true faith with fire and sword, or bring socialism to the countries of the third world, as some say, or make backward peoples happy for some reason, with the benefits of democracy and the market, or at a very small everyday level, decide for a loved one who he should be, who to study for, who to be friends with, who to marry. In a word, to do good. We are smarter, better, stronger, so we have the right. By allowing ourselves to do this, we try to play the role of God, but it ends badly, and no wonder. After all, this approach is based on the fact that there is no God. There is no divine providence about the fate of the world and every person. That our whole life is entirely described by the laws of nature and society, knowing which you can achieve everything. The novel turned out to be deeper than the Strugatsky brothers had planned. In the early 60s, they still had communist ideals. They put primarily anti-Stalinist pathos into the text. They saw in the actions of Stalin and his ideological followers a distortion of a good idea from their point of view. But it happens. The talented artist has said much more to his works than he wanted to say. Number 2. Monday begins on Saturday. The first part of this story, The Fuss Around the Sofa, was published in 1964 year. It is not by chance that the authors called it a fairy tale for younger researchers. We have humorous fiction in front of us. Light, sparkling. At first glance, tragic questions of existence are not raised here. Even evil as without it. It's quite caricatured here and, in general, toothless. But the story has become incredibly popular. It was often reprinted. In 1982nd year, a TV movie musical of The Magician was filmed on its basis, which is still given on television during the New Year holidays. The reason for success? The book perfectly reflects the public optimism of the first half of the 60s of the thaw era, the country, it would seem, parted with Stalinism. The face of Soviet socialism was gradually humanized. Science has developed by leaps and bounds. Communism on a global scale was just around the corner. In those years, the first secretary of the CPSU Central Committee, Khrushchev, promised that the current generation of Soviet people would live under communism, and communism was thought of as universal happiness, as an earthly paradise. Paradise on earth, because people will change qualitatively, scientific search will become the highest value, the highest goal, the conquest of nature, and human relations will be high and bright. Selfishness, cruelty, suspicion will become a thing of the past. Now it sounds naive, but then it was massively believed. The Strugatsky brothers also believed. It is this kind of faith that is a surrogate of faith in the kingdom of God and permeates Monday begins on Saturday. Writers do not invent anything new, but they try to breathe new hope into the original idea of the builders of communism through art. And the idea is, in fact, a reinterpretation of the Christian idea of the kingdom of God. From the point of view of Christianity, the nature of people is so distorted by evil that any good intentions lead to the construction of hell or its branch on earth. The only way out is to reunite with the Creator, which will be fully accomplished already on the other side of earthly life. And the idealist communist believes that a person will cope on his own, will learn how to build a paradise already here on earth. History, however, has shown what comes of it. The case takes place in the fictional northern town of Solovets, where there is nothing scientific research institute of witchcraft and wizardry. The institute's employees are the heroes of the story. The relationship between them, their scientific quest, becomes a plot convoy here. The main thing, in the words of the heroes themselves, is not an adventure of the body, but an adventure of the spirit. The adventure of the spirit is the knowledge, the study of the mysteries of nature, which in itself brings joy to the heroes. Hence the name Monday begins on Saturday. The inquisitive thought of a scientist knows no days off. Scientists by hook or by crook are trying to work at their institute on weekends. Of course, everything is not perfect for them. Along with creative people, mediocrity and hack demagogues work at the institute. The main one of them is Professor, a caricature of the infamous scientific functionary Trofim Denisovich Lysenko, and the deputy director of the institute, Modest Matveyevich Kamnidov, ran out. A caricature of an illiterate and, moreover, an ambitious bureaucrat. But these minuses only shade the pluses. They are thought of as inevitable temporary phenomena that can only slow down, but are not able to stop the coming happiness. By the way, being convinced materialists, Strugatsky ridiculed in the story what can be called lack of spirituality, or rather the primacy of the material. Professor Vibigala is trying to create a fully satisfied person, all of whose needs are purely material. It turns out to be a horror cadaver in the original sense of the word. That is, a living corpse, in other words, a zombie. A sincere charge of positivity, sincere pathos of scientific search, the ideal of a scientist, as a messenger of the future in the present, became the reason for the success of the story. And its direct continuation, the fairy tale about the Troika, is a much deeper and wiser thing. She surgically accurately shows the essence of the command of the administrative system, but she did not deserve such popularity. The reason for this is not only her difficult publishing fate. Here, right according to the book of Ecclesiastes, there is a lot of sadness in much knowledge, and most do not want to be sad. Number 3. Picnic on the Side of the Road. This story, first published in 1972, served as the basis for Tarkovsky's film Stalker. The script for it was also written by the Strugatskys. Later, a famous series of computer games was created based on her motives. What is the reason for its popularity? Firstly, a completely unexpected and catchy entourage was visited by highly developed aliens, leaving behind several anomalous zones. One of them becomes the place of the main action. In such zones, the laws of nature are violated. It's full of deadly anomalies. There you can find objects with strange and useful properties, the very existence of which is inexplicable from a scientific point of view. There are people, so-called stalkers, who go to the zone at the risk of their lives, looking for these artifacts. There was nothing like this in world fiction before. Secondly, this is the idea for which the bright entourage was created. The zone is a metaphor for the future, which can be both beautiful and terrible at the same time. These are both fears and hopes. Hopes not only for the solution of particular problems of humanity, hunger, diseases, and so on, but also for cardinal changes in human nature and consequently, the reconstruction of society. After all, if artifacts that are impossible from the point of view of modern science exist, it means that sooner or later, we will grow up to them, we will know them. And this knowledge, perhaps, will change us. This is all the same pathos of scientific knowledge as in the story Monday begins on Saturday, but not so straightforward. There is already uncertainty here, but a timid hope. The world is full of dirt and evil, and not individual flaws at all. But despite all the dirt, there must be something else. And this hope for something else is a very characteristic sign of the time of the 70s and 80s, when universal faith in the coming communism shrank. The reality became more and more depressing. The hope was only for a miracle. The children's version will suddenly arrive a wizard in a blue helicopter. Or muddy aliens will arrive, they will leave behind a garbage dump. This is an adult version, which the Strugatskys finally showed the main idea of the story. The most mysterious artifact of the zone, a certain golden ball, is able to fulfill any desires. But such desires that come from the heart, from the subconscious, psychologists would say. And from there, the heart can come very, very different. As it is known from the Gospel of Mark, coming from a person defiles a person. 4 evil thoughts come from within, from the human heart: adultery, murder, theft, extortion, malice, deceit, lewdness, envious eye, blasphemy, pride, madness. All this evil comes from within and defiles a person. At the same time, in most cases, we do not know what is going on in our subconscious, what passions are boiling there, what demons are frolicking. It is not for nothing that it is said to be afraid of your desires. God does not fulfill many requests because we ourselves do not realize what we really want. And what we really want can destroy us spiritually and physically. But the golden ball is not God. He automatically executes everything that the stalker who managed to get to him asks for. By the way, in order to get there, it is necessary, in fact, to make a human sacrifice. The only way to the golden ball is blocked by the meat grinder anomaly. After grinding someone, she calms down for a while and gives the other the opportunity to reach the ball. This is exactly what the main characters do. The extra-class stalker Rederick Schuhart. He went to the ball, hoping to beg for health for his daughter, and framed a young boy Arthur. But at that moment, something happened that changed the stalker's consciousness. Arthur, dying, shouted out his cherished wish. Happiness for everyone. For nothing, and so that no one leaves offended. It is these words that Schuhart repeats, eventually reaching the ball. From a Christian point of view, repentance happened to him. Metanoia. Literally in Greek, a change of mind. It is not a fact that the Strugatskys themselves invested exactly this meaning, but such an interpretation is quite acceptable. And these words of happiness for everyone for nothing, and so that no one leaves offended, eventually became a kind of humanistic prayer number for Inhabited Island. This novel is included in the so-called midday cycle. That is, in a cycle of works about the Earth of the 22nd century, about the world of triumphant communism. But its action takes place not on a bright Earth, but on the gloomy planet Saraksh, where, by an unfortunate accident, the main character, a 20-year-old Earthling Maxim Kammerer, got into. But Saraksha feels bad. Civilization is at the level of the mid-20th century. There was a world atomic war there recently, totalitarian regimes ruled there, fragments of a once unified empire. In general, everything that both contemporaries and current readers are well aware of affirmed the real Earth history. Maxim, with youthful fervor and enthusiasm, tries first to understand this society, then to correct it. Everything is developing according to the classical scenario. We wanted the best, it turned out as always. It is written vividly, fascinatingly. There are more adventures of the body here than adventures of the spirit. But the secret of the popularity of the Inhabited Island is not in Maxim's adventures at all. The main thing is a great metaphor, which is most memorable to the reader. These so-called PB's towers stand for anti-ballistic protection, which are actually used not for air defense purposes, but for mass propaganda. The towers generate some kind of radiation that makes the brains of the majority receptive to the ideas that are put into them. It works independently of intelligence and education on a physiological level. Only a small percentage of people do not lose critical thinking, but radiation also has an effect on them. They experience extreme physical pain. Thanks to the system of towers emitters, power is held in the country where the main action of the novel takes place, in the so-called country of the fathers. A novel was written in Strugatsky in the second half of the 1960s, in the era of all-encompassing Soviet propaganda. But the Soviet propaganda of that time was not very effective. The Strugatskys, of course, hinted at it, but they could hardly imagine what kind of development mass propaganda techniques would receive in the future. But we see it every day and hourly, and everywhere. We constantly use the expression zombified in relation to the victims of propaganda, alien to us. We often compare mass propaganda with radiation, sometimes without even realizing that we are using a metaphor from the Strugatsky novel. Moreover, the Strugatskys of the late 60s are no longer the optimistic guys of the early 60s, they are wiser and sadder. They understand that there are no simple solutions and complex issues. And the hero Maxim Kammerer eventually destroys the tower system. There is no radiation anymore, but it does not have a miraculous effect. Moreover, there are troubles that the ardent young man simply did not think of. And this is also an important metaphor. Yes, mass propaganda is evil, but its abolition does not become a lifesaver at all. Strugatsky understood this even when the Soviet power with its annoying propaganda seemed eternal to their readers. But here's what's not in the text, but it would be worth noting. From the Christian point of view, the root causes of the catastrophe, and the catastrophe of the inhabitants of the invented Saraksh, and our real earthly catastrophes are not in the radiating towers outside, but in the broken receivers inside. They work on receiving destructive signals and are reckless, and the connection with the source of creation, that is, with God, is severely disrupted. In the language of the Holy Fathers, damaged human nature is prone to sin. It is much easier to succumb to evil, including destructive propaganda, than to resist it. Number 5. The Beetle in the Ant-Hill. This story, first published in 1979 year, is also included in the midday cycle. Of its main character is the same Maxim as in the Inhabited Island. In front of us is no longer a young man with a burning view, but a man in full bloom, an employee of the special service called Comcontu. In fact, this is counterintelligence. It prevents threats from outside. Threats from other civilizations, hypothetically capable of harming the Earth. True, so far no obvious threats have happened. But the head of Comcontu, Rudolf Sikorsky, nicknamed Excellence, does not let himself or his employees relax. The fact is that the super-civilization that they are all so afraid of really exists. These are mysterious wanderers. Traces of their activity are constantly found on other planets and on Earth. Civilization is incredibly powerful, but nothing can be said for sure about it. Who they are, what values they are guided by, where they came from, where they are now. It's not even clear if they are still in our universe or have already disappeared somewhere. Incomprehensible ones cause fear. This is a natural property of the human psyche. In the text of the story, wanderers, or rather the consequences of their activities, are shown in such a way that readers have a feeling of horror. A feeling of something mystical can easily be understood by an excellence that is aware of its huge responsibility for the fate of the earth, and therefore believes that it is better to overdo it than not to do it. As a result, he kills Lev, a Balkan, a man whose origin is really connected with the Wanderers, and who, according to the Excel, obeys the program embedded in him, trying to get to a certain artifact of the Wanderers. What will happen if he gets there, no one knows, but the Excellence, just in case, suggests the terrible. And he kills Balkan at the moment when he is ready to grab the mysterious thing. The question is he right? His logic is understandable, but can it be justified? The Strugatskys themselves do not give an unambiguous answer, but they clearly show that in the beautiful bright world of noon, there are people who, for a variety of reasons, different to official ones, perceive others and others through the prism of a threat, the basis of which is always fear. Fear at the biological level is the most important mechanism for protecting life, self-preservation. But he, turning from a mechanism into the basis of thinking and action, can become a force directed against life. The question of what is permissible and unacceptable, these groups decide on the basis of subjective ideas about expediency. The credo of excellence, and we should not make mistakes. We are allowed to be called ignoramuses, mystics, superstitious fools. We will not be forgiven for one thing if we underestimated the danger. If our house suddenly smells of sulfur, we simply have no right to start talking about molecular fluctuations. We are obliged to assume that a devil with horns has appeared somewhere nearby and take appropriate measures, up to the organization of the production of holy water on an industrial scale. With this, the beetle in the anthill hooked the Soviet reader, as it continues to hook the post-Soviet reader. The problem is urgent. There is still no universally valid answer to what limits one can reach taking care of security, but we all give our own answers. And our private responses form the social reality in which we live. The author of the text is Vitaly Kaplan, a science fiction writer, editor of the FOMA magazine. If you like the video essay, support our project with a QR code or a link in the description so that we can create new videos. Subscribe to the Academy of OMA magazines so as not to miss the latest news in the world classics.